Now, this morning we continue our conversation. I do have my co-host in studio with me. Good morning, Luke, and how are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Shenell, and I'm doing excellent this morning. I think this morning's topic will be an interesting one. Tourism and Tobago goes hand in hand. So I'm really thankful that we're going to be asking the questions that you want to ask viewers. This morning's conversation will be a very thought-provoking one. So tune in, stick with us, and we're about to initiate the continuation of the Beneath the Surface series. Shenell, can you introduce our guests?
No problem, Luke. Now, this morning we are chatting with another one of our assistant secretaries. But this morning, just as in our headlines, in our news, we are chatting with the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation's Assistant Secretary, Assemblyman Niall. George, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Shenell. Good morning, Luke. Good morning, Tobago.
Now, before we get into all things that are happening at the division, you know that with this Beneath the Surface series, the intention is to really get to know who you are as an individual and some of the ideas and thoughts behind some of the policies and activities that you have implemented during your term, whether that has been at the divisional level or in your community with your constituents. We know within the division you have the role of supporting the secretary, and you within 2024 would have been able to move from one division to another.
Yes.
And how was that transition for you, moving from the Division of Settlement, Public Utilities and Rural Development over to the Division of Tourism?
Well, at the Division of Settlements, it's a slower moving division. Very impactful because we're dealing with homes and security of tenure basically. But you have a lot more approval processes to go through. So it's a lot slower moving, but very impactful. Whereas in the Division of Tourism, especially in the culture department, it's much faster. You are involved with a lot more meetings and conversation with stakeholders. And if you have ever been to a stakeholder meeting, you know these are very passionate people, and it can, you need some very good negotiating skills to deal with it at times. It can be a task at times.
And at the division, do you have a specific area of responsibility that you are focused on setting the policy for and leading the charge on?
Culture and sports tourism and community tourism.
Okay, and what are some of the policies that, since you have gotten over there, which is pretty short time,
Yes.
that you have been able to implement that was not there before you got there?
Well, in both sport tourism and community tourism, we are actually at the point of developing the policy. We have looked extensively at the national policy, and we are taking out the bits that are more catered towards the Tobago side of things, so that we can develop a policy on that, because most of the national policies don't really cater specifically to Tobago. We have a lot of broad brush policies that don't take the intricacies of the island on board. So as such, we have started developing a policy based and focusing primarily on the needs of Tobago and Tobagonians on Tobago.
Okay, great. And Mr. George, I want you to talk to me a bit about the strategic vision of the division. Granted that we know that Tobago's tourism sector has faced significant challenges from the pandemic to even global competition. When you think about the efforts of the division, what has been that strategy to reposition Tobago as, that tourism destination?
Well, we have to look at all aspects of the island. And when you're looking at it, there's a model in Castara, which is a heavy community-based model. And it has been successful in attracting tourists year after year after year. And that's because the tourists are having a slice of Tobago, a real authentic Tobago experience. They feel like one of us when they are in Castara. But we also have to look at mixing all the other attraction, the sites, the culture, everything that makes Tobago Tobago. It can't just be heavily focused on one aspect. It has to be integrated. Our festivals, such as the Tobago Heritage Festival or Jazz Festival. That was one of the reasons why Tobago now has the Tobago Carnival in October, because in February, March, the National Carnival, we have competing interests with Trinidad, and they have an established model, and you would see even locals flocking to Trinidad to partake in what is considered the mother of all carnivals. So that was heavy in the consideration in us having Tobago's carnival in October, which would be a standalone carnival, less competition, more opportunity for Tobagonians to take part in our local festival without dare I say, the distraction of the festivities that are happening in Trinidad. Gave us an opportunity to piggyback basically and collaborate with Trinidad entities so that we could have our festival move forward. It would also give us an opportunity to not make the mistakes that was made before.
Okay.
So we have an example to move forward from. So it's all about the holistic approach and getting everyone involved in the tourism of the island. Something that I'm also appealing to us as locals is to buy in and get involved, because no tourism product would be successful without buy-in of the citizens. It's about an experience, a holistic experience. Even the conversations on the road, the way that we deal with the tourists is very important. So each one on the island has to buy into the tourism product.
Okay, take me back to younger Niall George. What was life like growing up for you, and what were the factors that really influenced you, where you would have said to yourself, what probably leadership would be in my future, probably I should become a politician in the future?
I think it's something that happened naturally, Growing up, I would have played sports. I would have been captain in that. I would go back to high school. I went at Bishop's High School. I would have been the sports captain of the best house in Bishop's High School, Davies House. I know I'd get some flack, but the truth is the truth and you can't deny it, Then I went into growing up, I started playing all fours in the village team. I ended up being the captain of the village team. Then I went on to football with Stokely Vale. I ended up eventually being the manager of the football club. So, it was a natural inclination. I am someone that would garner respect just by the way I would do things, the way that I would treat people. So it has been a natural progression.
Okay.
And how has that transition been for you when it comes to your relationship with people in the community? Because we know you are representing a part of Plymouth, and we know Plymouth has a different culture from many villages, and there can be the tendency for persons to say, well, Niall, you are no longer with us. It feels like, you get rich and switch or you reach where you're going. How do you bridge that gap between not being too far removed from the community, but also having the time to do what needs to be done at the division level, implementing policies and staying on the ground?
So it's something that you have to find time to do, and the best way to do it is by being with your people. Go to football matches, for instance, Panorama, be at the Pantent as I would have usually done. It's just about being around. It's much more difficult now with the volume of work that you have to do, but you just have to do it. You have to find the time. It can be tiring. Sometimes you get home, and when you get home, you're wondering, how did I even get home? The route that you took, because you're that tired, but you just have to do it. That's the life that you've signed up for.
But for you, there's a new baby in the picture. So how does that incorporate into everything? Being a new mom or a recent mom myself, I understand the demand that does take. So how are you balancing it all?
You just have to try to be present at home when possible, and still balance the daily duties. It's not easy. It's very difficult. I'm here now, and if you notice, I have a bit of a stiff neck. And that, as I said, that all goes with the duty. You just have to make it happen. I mean, baby is growing, and as baby is growing, it gets easier. It is difficult, but you just have to do it. That's part of life. You have to find a way to make it work.
Okay, nice. Mr. George, I want you to walk me through that intersection of youth involvement and the division of tourism. I think tourism and culture offer significant opportunities for young people to get involved. What are some of the programs that have been implemented or the programs we can see rolling out that really gets our young creatives, from in that tourism value chain, from, the young creatives right up to entrepreneurs?
So, as you said, the orange economy is very important, and there are many programs within the culture division in terms of drum training, dance training. But one of the things that is also taking place on the island, there are a lot of cultural groups that receive support from the division of tourism. So it's about helping and propping. We are trying to empower our people to do their thing as well. It's not just about the division of tourism putting out programs as well. We encourage private persons to bring forward proposals. These proposals will then be screened, and based on their merit, assistance would be given. Panorama is going on currently, and we support the Panorama strongly. Actually, we are one of the main sponsors in the medium band final, being in Tobago, and that is important to us because our bands always travel to Trinidad. It's you have to bear a high cost just to get to Trinidad. For instance, if you wanted to go to small band finals, you'd have to get to Trinidad. Either you find some place to stay in South Park, some place to stay in town, and then you drive all the way to Skinner's Park to see the final. Then you have to get back and get to life. In my case, I had to get back, and I have a young baby, and immediately upon the reception, then I had to go to Charlottesville to get back. So that would have been a whole weekend of. That's probably why my neck is stiff now. But so it's very important for us to bring things to the island as well. That would bring bands, and with those bands, supporters come as well. So that would be very important for economic purposes as well.
Okay.
And when you talk about the ability to get funding and support for proposals, let's look at this Rhythm and Soul Festival that is being proposed for Easter. We are hearing the minority leader come forward to, indicate that the festival is projected to be around, I believe it's $9.5 million.
9.3.
Sorry, 9.3 thereabout. Was this one of those festivals where the proposal came to the division for part of the funding? What was the funding arrangement like, especially seeing that we came from a situation where the secretary reiterated on several occasions that the jazz festival in its previous form was not sustainable for the THA?
Right, so it's a sort of partnership, but one of the things that we are heavy on is that the cost borne by the taxpayers is minimal. The way the jazz experience was run before, so it brought a sense of earning to service providers, and it brought a sense of euphoria to people on the island, but it was at a heavy cost to the THE. And the chief secretary has been on record stating that jazz would not be done in the past iteration. So here we have a situation where Festival Commission has been tasked with basically engaging more private sponsorship and ensuring that ticket sales and private sponsorship would bear the majority of the cost, if not all of the cost. The only engagement in terms of finances that festival has with the promoter is that they were the ones that secured the act Buju Banton, the headline act Buju Banton before. So it was about us paying that cost and getting him to the island to be the headline act. And that's the only cost. And that would be around $225,000 US.
Okay, and Mr. George, we are expecting a new airport to touch down in Tobago very soon. However, while the argument is that, the airport is nice, the airport is big, people are arguing that people wouldn't come to visit Tobago just to see an airport. It comes down to the experience that you get from the island. And I think that argument ties into the broader conversation about Tobago's autonomy, because we understand that the limited resources and finances somewhat limits the division from really promoting the ambitious tourism policies that will boost the island's development. What are your thoughts on that?
So my autonomy is the most important thing on the table right now. But I have a issue where when we talk about resources, because there's this misconception that Tobago missed an opportunity by the bill not being passed, right? In its current state, the bill is inadequate, right? And there is also the fact that currently central government can give us more than the amount of percentage that is stated in the bill. So it seems like we have to tie our hands to something to receive 6.8%, when currently we could receive 6.9%.
Okay.
What is it that is preventing central government from giving 6.9%, or even the same 6.8% that is proposed in the bill? If you really want to give someone something, you wouldn't be breaking the law by giving us 6.8%. So what's holding you back from giving the 6.8%? And if you look at our budgetary asks, it has been at 5%, 5.5%, because we understand the constraints of the country. We understand the situation, but notwithstanding, we also understand that we have development needs on the island. So we would ask for 6.8%, and we know we won't get it. So we're asking for 5.5, between 5 and 5.5, and we are still not getting that. Is it that you have to tie your hands to get a reasonable allocation? If you look at the current arrangement in the Dispute Resolution Committee, it's between 4.03% and 6.9% based on the development needs of the island. And I am sure that if central government takes a serious look at the island, they would realize that we need more than 4.5%. It's not about what we want, it's what we need.
And I think there's an agreement with that on all sides. But as you touched a bit, Luke, on the new airport in Tobago, has there been any conversations that you are aware of with the airport authority to ensure, I continue to ask this to everyone that comes here, to ensure that Tobagonians receive equitable treatment where the allocation of spaces are, when it has to do with that in the airport, whether it be for duty-free shops or just to be able to ply their trade in that airport and be the economic benefactors of that new airport?
Well, Shenell, I'm sorry to say, based on the record of how that has been going so far, and I'm sure you would have heard Secretary James speak about the fact that the airport was built and the division had no viewing of the plans. As a matter of fact, the airport was built without approvals from health being given until a very late stage. So we are the central government, we'll do what we do, we have authority over Trinidad and Tobago, and we understand that, but there's nothing wrong with having a conversation. You know, it has ended up with a roundabout being misplaced in terms of location to the French Railroad that has been built. So I am just saying that based on the track record, I'm not very hopeful of the way things would go, because once authority is vested there, we could have as much conversation as we want. If they allow us, the final decision is with them, and we have very little control once it's not in the...
So are you saying that it is not guaranteed that Tobagonians would be given any type of quota or any type of preference when it comes to putting lucrative businesses in that Tobago airport?
Well, the only way I could guarantee that is if I have been privy to a conversation or an agreement that guarantees that. So at this point in time, there has not been any conversation or any agreement that guarantees that. So I would not be on record stating that.
Okay.
All right. Well, at this moment, viewers, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Just remember to share the live, share the live, share the live, and we'll be right back.
Let's go. It's a brand new morning. Rise up.
Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. And before we continue the Beneath the Surface series, we have an ad for you to tune into. So We are calling Tobago's finest artisans. Register for Tobago Treasures, a celebration of local content and community entrepreneurship. Now, the location is at the Belgarden Multipurpose Center, and it will be on Saturday, the 1st of February 2025 from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Now, the artisan packaging is $100 and it includes one table, one tablecloth, and 2 chairs. Now, there will be entertainment, games, food, and good vibes, and registration ends on Monday, 27th of January at 8 p.m. and there's a Google Doc form that you can fill out, so you can reach out to Tobago Update so we can share that link with you. Now, viewers, we are continuing the conversation with Assistant Secretary Mr. Niall George. Mr. George, touching on community tourism a bit and the division's efforts to really push that agenda. I know that doesn't really fall under your remit, but for the year 2025, what can we expect if you're able to, just give us that Easter egg? What can we expect to see from the division where community tourism is concerned?
Well, actually, that does fall under my remit.
Okay, nice.
So, as I said, there's a model in Castara that we intend to emulate. It has been very successful, actually the most successful model in Tobago, where we invest in more bread and breakfast style housing. And in order for us to do that, we would have to regulate this industry. You would have to make sure that your facilities are up to a certain standard. We'd have to have a registry. So we are basically there for putting or making the steps to put this in place, right? We would also have to provide some sort of assistance financially for persons to upgrade their buildings and so forth. So all of these processes in terms of this policy is being implemented as we speak.
So how do you navigate cultural preservation? Because, we still need to keep that Tobago culture preserved, but still have a sort of modern touch to keep to sort of drawing those more younger tech-savvy persons. How do you navigate between, keeping things modern but still keeping it Tobago and cultural?
But that's where policy comes into play, because what attracts persons to your island really is your culture. That's why culture and tourism have been placed together.
Okay.
It's because your culture is really, it's not just about sites only. It's because you can have the most beautiful sites.
Correct.
And the people aren't welcoming. You won't get anybody here. And that's why I said from the beginning, it has to be a holistic approach in the way that we deal with things. And that's why Castara is so popular. Because the tourists get there and they feel as though it's a home away from home. And that's the only way you could have someone returning to Ireland year after year for 17 years. It's because they have, when they get here, they feel this welcoming feeling, they get a taste of the cuisine, they can walk freely on the roadway, you have the natural beauty. So it's all about us time. And I mean, Tobago has beautiful communities. Everywhere you go, we have beautiful communities. And I'm appealing to us to hold on to that. We see some negative influences creeping into the crevices. I'm asking us to hold together, bind together, be strong, and repel these negative influences. But generally, we have a beautiful product. It's just for us to refine it and upgrade it. And as you said, integrate technology in terms of the way we attract people to these.
I'm glad that Luke brought that up because it's so important. When we even look at the Airbnb market, which is one of the primary markets that persons are now using now when it comes to accommodation in Tobago. So when it comes to revitalizing or building that on that community tourism, yes, you're giving persons grants to upgrade their space, but it would be naive of us to think that everybody wants that Castara outdoor natural aesthetic. And there are different demographics who require different things. For instance, there are persons who will say, if I am leaving my home, which is already my own luxurious space, I want to go into a space that feels luxurious. And when you look at the properties that do the best on Airbnb, a lot of the time, it's those properties that have a touch of modernity and, that taste of luxury. how are you at the division working together with the property owners when giving them those grants to ensure that the balance is struck when upgrading the property?
Again, as I said, that's exactly where the policy comes into play. And it's just like any other division where grants are structured based on needs. That's how we would have to do it. It can't be one grant base for everyone. It has to be based on the specific needs and the specific qualifications of an applicant.
Right. And so is there any training attached to the grant in terms of what they should be upgrading and how it should be upgraded and what type of appeal they should be trying to have to the tourists?
So generally, in terms of tourism, we need human resource training all around. So they would be treated. There's a necessity for training at all levels of tourism. I honestly think that we need to attack tourism from a school base, as low as even primary school, so that it becomes a way of life for citizens. If you travel to other Caribbean countries, and this is something that I say all the time, our greatest blessing has turned out to be our greatest curse. In terms of our oil money, we have been a rich Caribbean state, and most of the islands going up the Caribbean, these people need tourism. It's the only way of life. Many of us in Trinidad and Tobago have found another way of life, and the sensitivity towards tourism is less acute in Trinidad and Tobago. So we need to make people, or to educate people of the benefits of tourism. Tourism is big money, and if you do it the right way, it can lead to a much better and more comfortable life for you. So it's about investing your time, investing your money, and there are many roads to be gained from it.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, you are the area representative for Plymouth Black Rock. So from the perspective of the area representative for that area, how has that been thus far for you? What were some of the initiatives, the project, the plans, the visions you were able to execute? And you could touch on some of the challenges you would have experienced as an area representative.
So my district is a huge district, and it could be considered a rural district in urban Tobago. Plymouth is very well developed. Plymouth Black Rock is fairly well developed, but then when you go into areas like Mount Hay, Fairbanks, Orange Hill, it's a bit underdeveloped in terms of road infrastructure. And that's why it goes back to resources and need in terms of development. Many of the critical road infrastructures that would be needed in my district are $1 million projects. So they would be slow in developing because we are at a time where we have financial crunches and we have inherited a huge debt, and we still have to find a way to move forward. Now, one of the things that is very important and sometimes overlooked with this administration is that we have chosen people over infrastructure. We got into office, we raised the salaries of CPEP workers, we raised the salaries of URP workers, we secured the contract of nurses, we have the 10-on, 10-off programs, because we understand that it's a very difficult time financially. And we are trying to secure homes in terms of job opportunities and job security. But the pie is the pie, and the resources are what they are. So you have the choice of employ or secure people, build more things. So there has been some suffering in terms of building more things for the people. We have not stopped. We continue to develop the island, because you see there are the friendship roads. There's the road in the back at RC there. We are continuing to do development work, but we have given priority to persons and people within the community. So it's much more difficult to do both with the resources that we have, and that's why, as you said, autonomy is very important.
And when it comes to some of the plans that you had coming into office, I remember one of those major plans had to do with that Plymouth jetty. Where are you in that process? And were there any plans that you had that, you know, you really could not have accomplished, and it hurts your heart that hasn't been done as yet?
Well, the Plymouth jetty, the main issue with the jetty would be the lease of the lands surrounding the jetty. One of the leases has expired and one will expire this year. And until those leases have expired, no progress can be made with the jetty. We have to get out of those, well, the second lease, and then we would be able to progress. Because if you look at the area, it's a very compact area in terms of storage of any material that would be needed to construct the jetty. Those, basically the two parcels of lands that we would have been able to use were occupied by Mr. Gillette. So unless we are out of those leases, it would be, the storage and transportation costs will be astronomical in terms of building the jetty. So as soon as we are out of those leases, then full speed ahead.
Meaning with the persons who are in the lands nearby, as long as they are no longer in that lease, or the THA no longer has?
As long as Mr. Gillette's leases have expired.
Right.
Because he's still in control of the main parcel, which is a parcel just above the land, above where the post office area would have been there, and where the storage tanks to the fuel are currently.
Understood. And when it comes to some of the projects that you came into office that were near and dear to your heart, that you promised your constituents that you have not been able to deliver, what were some of those projects, and how have you been able to communicate with them on the progress of those projects?
So just as I communicated with you here, I have been upfront in terms of the main project that I would have focused on would have been the jetty, and it has not come to fruition as yet. The thing about when I campaigned is that I took an approach of, I may have ideas, but if you look across Tobago, there are many ideas that politicians have implemented and they are unused because the community never bought into that idea. So it's about, where I'm concerned, it's about representing your interests. We meet, we decide what you want, and then we move forward from there. And when I got into office, the main thing that persons within my district were complaining about was road access. Road access. You'd have the Roselle area, in the Marysville area, the Orange Hill Road. So we weren't able to upgrade these roads to a level that I would have liked to have them upgraded. But one of the things that I've focused on is making sure that the roads are passable, making sure that people have access to and from their homes. So whether it be grading, whether we are able to put some rock and roll and oil, that's the main focus where these roads are with me until we have attained finances where we can have superior upgrades.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a quick break right here, and we'll be back as we continue this conversation very soon. So see you again. Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. This morning we continue our Beneath the Surface series, chatting with Assemblyman Niall George. Now this morning, unfortunately, we have to round up the discussion, but for you, we've asked all the representatives that came here, are you looking to put yourself back up for office come next THA election? And do you think that you would receive the type of support from the community that is needed for that? Is it something that you want to pursue again?
Yes, I would like to pursue it again. And I know it would be tougher because the expectation of this administration was very high. But the reality is, you could only deal with what you have, and in terms of the resources given to us, it has been constantly going downwards in a time where inflation is going upwards. And I'll speak in layman terms here. We as a government face the same challenges as the man on the ground. I'm sure that a bachelor who would have made groceries for $1,500, those groceries are now at approximately $3,000. And these are the same housing material has risen. These are the same prices that as a government you face. So you would hear central government banding about that we have received the most money of any THA. Yes, it's the highest figure. But when you look at the spend that you would get from that figure, it has been astronomically lower. So in terms of some of the things that we would have liked to get done, we didn't, but that's natural. That's governance. You have to reprioritize and you have to refocus. So it's just about us continuing to explain to the people, continuing to do what we have done, continuing to choose people over things, and moving forward.
Okay, great.
I'd also like to take a moment to congratulate Eastside on their current victory in small conventional band. I'd also like to congratulate all the other bands that took place. I mean, you could only have one winner. Well, in this case, two winners because there was a tie for first. But I'd like to congratulate all of the pan sides that played in small and single pan. I know from visiting pan tents the long hours, the hard work that is put into it, a lot of hard work by drill masters, by captains, and to see it come to fruition, the young arrangers that we have in our midst that are making Tobago proud. Well, Mr. Ramsey, Kirsch Ramsey, who would have retained the title, Mr. O.J. Richards, who would have won the title in the past. They have Mr. Toby, Mr. Nore, Leandro Nore, we have Keishon Julian, and these young arrangers and bands that have been flying the flag of Tobago very high and have been making us very proud. Tobago thanks you. We thank you at the Division of Tourism, and the THA thanks you, and we'd just like to say congratulations to them again.
And Mr. George, what would you want your legacy to be as Assistant Secretary? Meaning, how do you see your role really shaping the reality and the perception of Tobago's tourism sector? So
we, based on my responsibility, I would like us to make an impact in sport and community tourism that would add benefit to our tourism product. Sports tourism is very underviewed in my opinion, and have such a huge impact on our tourism product. I mean, I went to teams, and being there made me understand that some of the things that we take for granted is exactly what the tourists are looking for. For example, the ability to go in, let's say use a ground like Speyside or Plymouth, for example. We go to that ground, we play cricket, and then you could just take off your clothes and walk to the beach. That is not something that tourists are accustomed to. That is something that excites them. So we have to find a way to integrate these things that we take for granted into our tourism program.
I like the fact that you included that, because a lot of times when you travel to different countries, you can just pop up at a court somewhere or a sporting facility and just participate in sport as a tourist with your friends as one of your activities. You can even go on a date on a golf club, at a golf club or anything like that. So when it comes to your strategy of boosting community sport tourism, what would that look like in the Tobago context?
So it would come in terms of events and just natural accessibility to sporting facilities as well. So currently we are looking at two, I wouldn't speak about them yet because they aren't concrete, but we are looking at two sporting events to be brought to the island. Very popular, fairly inexpensive to host, and that's right along our alley, because as we all know, resources are scarce and we have to find creative ways to do things.
And does that have anything to do with drag racing or motorsport?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, okay. Well, again, we want to thank you so much for your time here this morning and, taking the time out to come and speak to Tobagonians. I have an interesting question though. What would you say to members of your community who would say that they are not happy with your representation?
Shenell, the reality is no matter what you do, no matter how well you do, there are people that would be displeased with you. Whether it's for something personal that they would like you to do for them or otherwise. And it's, as a representative, it's impossible to please every one of your constituents or district persons. So I just do the best that I can do, and it's a majority that wins. So I'm hoping and praying and believe strongly that the dissenters would be in the minority.
And wrapping up, Mr. George, last question for you, and you'll be free. When you think about the island of Tobago, what does Tobago mean to you personally?
Tobago means everything to me. Tobago is my home. It's where I've grown up. It's where I reside. It's where I intend to spend the rest of my days. And it's imperative that we protect Tobago, protect our identity, protect our culture, while also, as you said, advancing in an age where technology is ruling. But we have to keep our Tobago base, our Tobago-ness, because it's very important. Because if you don't know where you came from, then you definitely don't know where you're going.
Well,
Excellent.
well, Mr. George, thankfully for you, we do have a bit more time to ask you about 2 or 3 more questions, but we have to take a quick break. So viewers are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. The conversation is not done just yet.
Well, cash.
It's a brand new morning. Let's go. It's a brand new morning. Rise up.
Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. Myself and my co-host, Mr. Luke James Trim, we are still here this morning, and we are still asking the questions that you want asked to Assemblyman Niall George. Now, last week we saw some activities that we might deem to be unprecedented happening in the House. We saw where the presiding officer asked one of the assemblymen to leave the chambers. Now, as Assistant Secretary and Deputy Presiding Officer, can you give us your take on the situation, and do you feel like it was dealt with in the best way possible, especially according to the existing standing orders?
Indeed, I believe that they were dealt with in the best way. I find it, I found Mr. Duke to be very disrespectful. He kept on saying that he's an elected member of the House, and so is Assistant Secretary Baines, who was presenting at the time. And for Mr. Duke to be disturbing Assistant Secretary Baines in his presentation, the presiding officer spoke to Mr. Duke, and then he started referring to the chamber as a Mickey Mouse house. And he went even further to be referring to the presiding officer as Minnie Mouse. And I am saying that Mr. Duke, who claims that he's a representative, an elected representative, has youngsters looking at this. We have youth parliament where youngsters are looking to emulate us. Is that the behavior that he wants them to emulate? Is that what he was elected to do? We have to sit, and we often sit and listen to Mr. Duke, whether we like his presentation or not. There are other presentations that you listen to, whether you like those presentations or not. And Mr. Duke is hardly even ever in the assembly halls. He hardly stays throughout a sitting. He would come, he would contribute, and he would leave, showing scant disregard to everyone's else contribution as far as I'm concerned. And as soon as you don't get something your way, that is the eruption that takes place in the chamber. The presiding officer asked him to leave not because she wanted to silence him, but because he was not being respectful to the person that was presenting. And when the presiding officer is on her feet, you are supposed to be quiet and give way. And Mr. Duke did not relent, so he had to be asked to leave.
And Mr. George, the unfortunate thing about that situation is that when you look from a regional perspective, even internationally, when people see our behaviors in parliament and legislators, it gives them an indication of that is who we are. You know, recently we would have seen what happened in the Bahamas when they had to throw out a member, escort him out. We see the behaviors of St. Vincent and Grenadines, Mr. Ralph Gonzalez. And for someone who doesn't know Tobago culture, when they view that clip, they will think this is how Tobagoans operate. But on a positive note, shifting gears to go around that conversation, we need to get young people involved in our civic duty. And as Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm glad that you are here so you can ask the question. If you can tell us, what can we expect to see to get young people involved in the conversations that really matter to the governance of the island of Tobago? Because yes, we understand that your administration has been vehemently pushing the conversation about Tobago's autonomy, but to keep it fresh and to keep it going, we need young people to be a part of that conversation. What can we see rolling out from the legislature very soon to bridge that gap between the youth and the conversation of constitutional reform?
So, unfortunately, I can't answer that question as yet, because I've not met with the presiding officer in terms of the rollout for the year. And as the deputy presiding officer, I am not as heavily involved in the legislature, because remember, the legislature is also supposed to be independent, and I would focus more on what got me here, which is my district and my division. It's not that I don't focus, but that is the least of my focuses, because there's a full-time presiding officer, which is Mr. Abby Taylor.
Understood.
So it's not that I would meet with her periodically for us to discuss these things in terms of the plans going forward, but I have not met with her on the aspect as yet.
So, Mr. Duke could have raised that there were some areas of the standing orders that this administration has not been executing, and one of that has to do with the Public Accounts Committee. Do you think moving forward we would see the implementation and the effective functioning of that committee? And can you advise us on why some of the areas that he raised that are not functioning in its current state?
So there are a number of committees. I am not a member of the Public Accounts Committee. I'm a member of the House Committee. And there are persons responsible for leading these meetings, and there are members that are part of these committees. I cannot speak to the Public Accounts Committee.
I believe that one is led by the minority leader.
Yes,
and
one
he
is
would
led
have
by the
indicated
House.
that he has tried on several occasions to have those meetings, and that went unsuccessful.
Well, Shenell, I really cannot answer what I wasn't even aware until I saw it on the
Order paper.
on the order paper. So that would have to be dealt with the leader of that committee and the presiding officer. So we are members of the House Committee, which is led by the leader of Assembly Business. So that and again, as with Mr. Duke's situation, if he sees there's a problem with anything that is being done by the presiding officer, I heard he say this administration, the presiding officer.
Yes.
All right. And he has to go through the proper channels. There are channels for every single thing within the legislature. And if you noticed, when I went onto the chair, the minority leader started to argue or tended to argue with me about something that I ruled on. And I said to him very clearly, while I sit in the chair, that is my ruling. And there are channels to deal with every single thing. It can't be shouting the house is Mickey Mouse house and calling the presiding officer Minnie Mouse and no, that's childish behavior in my opinion, and it's not befitting of the house. And in my opinion, again, the presiding officer was very correct to ask him to come up, to get out of the house and be escorted.
So do you think that some of the things that were raised in the last sitting should have been dealt with differently as opposed to bringing it before the House in the form that it was brought. For instance, as you indicated, do you think that these are things that they should have written to the presiding officer about and have those meetings and make those adjustments and ensure that all committees are functioning well as opposed to bringing it to the House?
Well, I don't know the reason the minority leader brought it to the House. To my knowledge, I am not aware of any letters being written, and I think that would be the right process to deal with it internally before bringing it to the House. But again, we're in politics. At the end of the day, it's politics, and politics sometimes is heavy perception. So, sometimes it's not even about whether you did it or not, and it's about the perception in the public eye. So it could be a political tactic. It could be that he really tried all of the avenues. So I'm just saying that I can't know the reasons for the minority doing what they do.
All right, Mr. George, so it was a very interesting conversation today. Thank you for the extra 15 minutes, and thank you again for agreeing to sit down in the hot seat. Shenell, we are continuing the conversations this week, and then by Friday, we're going to wrap things up with the Chief Secretary. Still no word on Megan Morrison, so I think we can confirm by now she will not be participating in this conversation for whatever reason. So, viewers, I want to thank you all for tuning in this morning. It's always great to have you all here. Shenell?
I believe that tomorrow we do have a Secretary for Tourism, Tashia Grace Boris.
Lovely.
So all those questions that were not under your purview, we would have the opportunity to ask her tomorrow.
Lovely. All right, viewers, so thank you for tuning in this morning. Thank you for choosing Tobago Updates. Thank you for believing in the vision and the impact we have on this island of Tobago. Just be safe this week, be careful on the roads, and most importantly, remember to share the live, share the live, share the live.
People in